Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Outlaws and Gunslingers. We are your host, the Mouth of Michiganders. This is Bang, Dang's over there, and we are moving on into our, I think, fifth? Fifth, if you count Bugsy Siegel way back when we first started this podcast, but fifth, technically, Prohibition episode. You saw Bugsy Siegel, Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, George Remus, and now another guy that probably isn't in the spotlight all the time, that it's not a sexy name in the Prohibition era, like
Sexy.
Al Capone and Lucky Luciano.
I say sexy.
It's sexy, like a sexy, ooh,
No.
that's going to attract people.
No.
This is when you see William McCoy, yeah, I just stooged it off now. When you see William McCoy, people aren't going to be like, oh, no, I got to hear that. So it's not a sexy name where it's going to attract people, but once you hear his story, you'll find out why he's considered one of the greatest rum runners / bootleggers of the early Prohibition era, and why he was probably the most respected figure in Prohibition as far as not ripping anybody off, the alcohol that he sold, and the way he did things was he had tons of respect from everybody that he sold to, and all that good stuff. He was a good old boy from Florida. So William McCoy.
I just figured, hey man, it's bullshit that the government did this. I'm gonna supply this to the people, but not rip them off and be a dick about it.
Well, as you guys can see, Dang doesn't know his story.
Huh?
He'll be. Dang doesn't know his story, so he'll be learning with the rest of you guys today on William.
You just said that.
William Bill McCoy. No, I didn't say that he was mad at the government.
I didn't say he was mad at the government.
I said he was respected at the way that he did business and all that good stuff, because unlike many operations that illegally produced and smuggled alcohol for consumption during Prohibition, McCoy sold his merchandise unadulterated, uncut, and clean. So the liquor he got, he didn't touch it.
Not watered down.
He got it and shipped it off.
Not watered down.
And he never paid a cent to organized crime, politicians, or law enforcement for protection. Dude did it all legit by himself, didn't look for others for help, and he made a reputation of being a good guy to do business with. That's why he was so successful in the few short years that he actually did it. This guy was born in Syracuse, New York in 1877 to a Scottish-American family. Scottish for a change, huh? You don't hear about Scots too much.
No.
He had a brother named Ben who was 5 years older and a sister, Violet, 5 years younger. The hell of an increment, huh? Every 5 years we're going to have a kid, baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, his father, who was also named William McCoy, was a brick mason who had been in the Union Navy during the American Civil War, serving on the blockade of southern coast. Bill McCoy attended the Pennsylvania Nautical School on board the USS Saratoga in Philly, and he graduated in 1895, first in his class. So this dude's a smart little motherfucker when it comes to boats, which you're going to see boating is his preferred method of choice coming later in this episode. He then served as a mate and a quartermaster on a few vessels, including the P&O steamer Olivet, which is in Havana, Cuba, when the USS Maine exploded in 1898 and started what was one of the key points to starting the Spanish-American War, I believe.
That's rough stuff.
Yes, sir. So he's had some boat service knowledge before he even. This is way before the Prohibition.
He knows the waters.
Sure does.
Around 1900, the McCoys moved to a small Florida town named Holly Hill, just north of Daytona Beach.
Holly Hill.
Bill and his brother Ben operated a motorboat service in a boatyard.
You old motorboat son of a bitch, you old sailor, you.
Nice. In a boatyard in Holly Hill and Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
By 1918, 18 years later, having constructed vessels for millionaire customers that included Andrew Carnegie and Vanderbilt's, among others. Bill earned a reputation for being a skilled yacht builder. Nice. Everybody wanted McCoy's yachts.
Selling $1 million yachts, man.
What you got out there? I got a McCoy.
I got a
Nice.
McCoy. Well, we'll see where that, what do we got? I got the real McCoy.
I got the real McCoy.
Well, during Prohibition, their excursion and freight business could not compete with the new highways and buses being built up and down the coast and across Florida. And then one day they were approached by a rum runner. He's like, I'll give you guys $100 to sail this liquor shipment through Rum Row, which is like a blockade kind of like right outside on international waters to obviously Rum Row. They call it for a reason.
Right.
Well, they declined the offer initially, but old Bill, he couldn't stop thinking about the money that could be made. He's like, damn, our business is failing. And this guy just offered me $100 to sail like I would normally sail. Jeez.
Right.
Well, soon he pulled together the last of his savings and began his bootlegging career by buying a 90-foot schooner called the Henry L. Marshall. His first trip was to a smuggler's port in Nassau, which is a pirate's safe haven back in the day. In like the 1500s. In the Bahamas, where he stocked up on 1,500 cases of Canadian whiskey.
Ooh-wee.
He arrived in U.S. waters 3 days later and sold the whiskey for $15,000. With the huge payday and the fact that the money was tax-free, Bill couldn't get enough, and bootlegging became his new career. He's like, I just made $15,000 by doing what I love, sailing the sea. All I had to do, I didn't even load it myself. I just sat there while everybody loaded it.
Right.
They put it on my boat. I came back, sold it. I didn't even unload it.
No, did nothing.
And I collected $15,000 for it. Oh man, what a career!
Probably a little less than that after paying his boatmen and
still,
what do they call them?
Still, it's in
boatmates. His
1918, $15,000 is a lot of money.
He probably kept at least 10 of it. Business was going so good that Bill hired a new skipper for the Marshall and purchased a new 130-foot schooner.
That's how business was going.
Called Arethusa.
I think it's Arthusa.
Arthusa, yeah, Arthusa. And that became it's Arethusa, guys. That was his boat. And this became his new flagship, as well as serving as a floating liquor store.
He's like, I'm getting rid of this little puny-ass 90-foot boat,
right.
And we're going to upgrade 40 feet to, the thing had everything. My captain's quarters is now 10% bigger.
And make this bitch a floating liquor store.
And, yeah.
Boats pull up.
I think he had a bell when people walked on deck. It was like, ding, like the liquor stores.
Or when they got close enough to the boat, because another boat would come in, right? Taking advantage of international water laws, Bill would park his fully stocked schooners just outside of American waters and have buyers come to him from the mainland, of course. I mean, he's doing nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Out of caution.
Well, he is, just not.
Right, in not American waters.
Right.
Yeah. Out of caution, he only allowed 2 buyers on board at a time and made sure that nobody would try to hijack him by placing a swivel machine gun on deck. Nice. Bill's success and reputation.
Could you imagine rolling up to that ship or that schooner, boat, whatever, and there's a fucking swivel machine gun pointed right at your ass? You guys better not. That's at least firing, 5-inch shells?
Oh, my. They're huge.
Right.
Bill's success and reputation grew, which attracted many loyal customers. They're like, this guy's legit, man. I mean,
right.
I feel more comfortable coming to him than going to Lucky Luciano, who Bill often invited them to stay aboard for evening cocktails. They're like, why don't you chill out
on board, have a drink or two.
You're in the middle of the freaking ocean.
Right. It's like the Simpsons episode where they're on the yacht and they're holding the monkey knife fighting. It's all going on these boats. Well, then Bill made a number of successful trips aboard the Arthusa, and along with the Henry L. Marshall and up to 5 other vessels, he became a household name through his smuggling activities. Well, he mostly hauled rye, Irish, and Canadian whiskey, as well as other fine liquors and wines. He's like, I'll do what you want. Mm-hmm. He's like the guy that comes up to you on the street with a trench coat on, and he's like, I got watches, I got
whatever.
everything, necklaces, bracelets, earrings.
What you need.
He is credited with inventing the burlock, which is also known as hams, a package holding 6 bottles jacketed in straw, 3 on the bottom, then 2, then 1, so like a pyramid, which was sewed tightly in a burlap. It was compact and easy to handle. These were generally known in the Coast Guard as sacks. How many sacks he had? Well, he got like 15 sacks.
Right.
Well, the burlocks were easily stacked and a lot easier to move between vessels than the traditional wooden cases, obviously.
Right.
Some hams were stuffed with salt, so that if they were about to be caught, they could throw them overboard, and with the weight of the salt, they would sink, hiding all the evidence. But the salt would then dissolve a little bit later, and these guys would just come back and collect the bottles that floated to the surface afterwards.
Huh.
And come back and sell them. Genius.
Genius.
And now we got a picture of what they look like. I mean, that's a hell of a stacking system.
Right.
This dude's a genius.
Right. Little triangles like that.
There's 5 in a sack. Mm-hmm.
August 2nd, 1921, just off the coast of New Jersey. His vessel Marshall and its captain and the crew were boarded and seized by the United States Coast Guard's flagship Seneca.
Oh, this Seneca, they're going to be a problem.
They seized at least 1,400 cases of whiskey as well. Even though they were clearly in international waters, the Coast Guard enacted the Maritime Act of 1790 to commit the seizure. They suspected there was a crime.
You know they were going back, all these Coast Guards. What are we going to do about these water fucking vessel captains smuggling in liquor from other places? There's got to be a law that that says we can go more than the 3 miles.
Well, the Maritime Act of 1790 is that if vessels that were in the process of committing crimes could be approached 12 miles out from shore, which was about 1 hour's sailing time.
And in this current time in 1921, the technical international water was only 3 miles off the shore, so they could go another 9 miles. And they somebody was looking way back in the books for that, because
funky.
Well, it was in 1790, and the way that it was set up was that they could go 12 miles out of international water or into international water, which was
12 miles from shore.
Right, which was about 3 miles. I mean, which was about or no, they could do 12 miles here, but the one that's in place right now that we're working off of in 1921 was based off of when cannons were fired from the ships, and the farthest that a cannon could fire was the limit, which was 3 miles at the time. That's why the current law is 3 miles, because a cannon can only fire 3 miles. So then that's what Bill is working off of, and then these guys went back in the annals of time and was like, wait a minute. This says we can go back 12 miles.
Ooh, I think we should do this.
I think they're committing crimes.
Yeah.
Even if they're not, we could. Right. What's stopping them from saying approaching and boarding a ship and just claiming that they're committing crimes anyways?
All right.
Nothing.
That's nuts.
This new legal precedent was a major blow to rum runners, obviously, and smugglers on Rum Row. Although at first they didn't know who owned the marshal, they soon found out it was Bill, and he became the most wanted man in Prohibition at the time. To prevent any more surprises with the Coast Guard, he renamed the Arthusa to Tomoka and registered it under British sovereignty as well as French sovereignty as the Marie Celeste. So under French, it was Marie Celeste, and under British, it was the Tomoka.
All right.
This offered him some protection as the Coast Guard were less likely to board international vessels in international waters.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, at first maybe, but then when they find out who's doing this shit, they ain't going to have no problem.
Well, we'll see. 1922, Bill moved his operations from Nassau to a small French fishing village south of Newfoundland in Canada, and he called it St. Pierre.
Well, he didn't call it. It was already called it.
Right.
He's like, you know what? I know there's like hundreds of people living here already.
You guys already have a name, but
we're going to rename this.
St. Pierre sounds pretty good. With its close proximity to the United States' advantage of not being under U.S. law and total cooperation from the poor locals, it became one of the most successful smuggling ports in history. That's St. Pierre, Newfoundland, Canada.
Just south of Newfoundland.
Bill's arrival in the French town transformed St. Pierre from a sleepy fishing town to a booming economy.
Oh, it sure did, because 1 year.
Economy.
Just 1 year after Bill came to town, over 1,000 vessels were recorded coming and going from the island. Fishermen from the town were rehired as longshoremen or crew on the vessels, and pretty much every barn, garage, and cellar was turned into liquor warehouses. It was like a safe haven for fucking bootleggers and rum runners, man. At the end of 1923, 6 million bottles of alcohol would pass through, which was equivalent to 1,500 bottles per resident. So imagine us just going down in our cellar and having 1,500 bottles of liquor.
I mean,
that was...
if anybody has a decent wine cellar, I mean, not about 1,500, but there's hundreds of bottles.
Maybe 100. That's a huge-ass wine cellar.
Right.
Well, by 1931, an estimated 1.8 million gallons were exported in that year alone. Mr. Al Capone, is also said to have a warehouse there and would visit it frequently. Well, with the end of Prohibition, the town would basically die overnight, just like you've seen countless times in the Wild West. Once the mines are gone, everybody else is gone.
Yep.
This time in the island's history became known as La Temps de la Fraude, which means the time of the scam. A visiting Canadian journalist wrote of the town. The odor grew so strong that at times the fog that rode up on St. Pierre's steeply inclined streets with the nightly tide would carry a distinct Scotch flavor. So imagine you're walking through the streets, inhaling fog, and you're getting drunk at the fucking same time. That'd be great. Great. That'd be a great town to live in.
Right. 23rd of November, 1923, Bill's luck would come to an end.
Oh, no, Billy.
6.5 miles off the coast of Seabright, New Jersey, the United States Coast Guard Seneca boarded
That
and
damn
seized.
Seneca.
They seized the Tomoka, with Bill aboard. Damn. Bill initially tried to outrun the Seneca, but surrendered after a warning shot from the Coast Guard. McCoy described the chase that led to his capture. When the Tomoka Is it Tomica?
Oh, they also say this guy sounded a little bit like Foghorn Leghorn, so...
Yeah, well,
seriously,
I say.
When the Tomoka.
Right. When the Tomoka was boarded...
I mean, that's up your alley. You always want to do, like Mikey said.
What did he say?
Remember he was like, why'd you always go into Southern accent? I said, that's dang. That's dang.
Right.
Now this is your opportunity to.
Right. McCoy described the chase that led to his capture, and it goes like this. When the Tomoka was boarded under cover of the Seneca's guns, I immediately set sail and ran away with the boarding party. 1 lieutenant, 1 bosun, and 113 seamen.
For those,
and 113 of them? All wrapped
For you guys who don't know what a bosun is, he's basically the right-hand man of the boat.
And he also had 13 seamen on the board. And only upon their pleas did I heave to and put them back on the Seneca. The damned radio was too severe and handicapped for me. I surrendered after Seneca had fired 4-inch shells at me.
Man, I would too. 4-inch shells coming at you. Well, the New York Times article that reported on the capture and arraignment of McCoy described the incident as follows. It says the report to Collector Eltine showed that the Tomoka was first boarded by Lieutenant Commander Perkins of the Coast Guard cutter Seneca, who ordered the crew keep silent. The bow of the schooner was then turned out to sea, and when the commander of the cutter observed the movement, he sent a shot across the bow of the Tomoka. She returned the fire with a machine gun set up on her forward deck. Wait, he didn't mention him returning fire out with the machine gun.
And did that really happen? No.
Right. Well, it is the New York Times, so we see how they are. But we see a nice little picture of the Seneca. What they say it was, 130 foot?
130 foot. His boat was.
Built in 1908 and still running down rum runners. It was 204 feet long. So, yeah.
4 feet.
Way bigger than the
All right.
than his ship. So, but yeah, he never mentioned that he shot at him back. Well, that doesn't make sense though. Why would they were fired a warning shot and he clearly surrendered?
Right.
If he shot back at him, they would definitely unload their 5-inch or 4-inch shells more than just one surrender or warning shot.
Yeah.
So New York Times. Fake news again.
Of course. Due to his many connections and money, Bill managed to stay out on bail for 2 years, thanks to a judge who allowed him to be monitored in a hotel and could come and go as he pleased. When asked what defense he planned to make at the hearing before the trial, McCoy introduced details of operations by replying, I have no tale of woe to tell you. I was outside the 3-mile limit, selling whiskey, good whiskey, to anyone and everyone who wanted to buy
Well,
it.
see, I mean, he's got a point.
Right.
He's outside the legal limit, and he's selling to these guys. It's not his responsibility what these guys do or where they take it. If they take it back into U.S. lands, it's not his responsibility. He sold it in international waters where it was legal. So if they take it out of there, then it's not his fault. And he was right. He was selling good whiskey, uncut, unadulterated.
Right.
And you're not telling me that none of his whiskey didn't end up in the hands of some of the politicians that were...
Of course it did.
We already know during Prohibition that the president had alcohol shipped to the White House. We already know countless politicians that were drinking and going to speakeasies and shit like this. You're telling me...
It's true.
That's the thing about government, man.
No.
Do as I say, not as I do. Rules for thee, not for me. Well, Bill would end up serving 9 months in a New Jersey jail when he pleaded guilty to all counts to avoid a long, drawn-out trial. He's like, I don't have the energy or the money for this.
Right.
The legal fees ate away at his savings, and after he got out, he decided that since he was away for so long, he wasn't going to compete with the crime syndicates that had now taken over bootlegging.
Right.
He's like, I have no interest in... That'll get you some hot water, too, when you're trying to go to the crime syndicates. They'll put a bullet in your brain. It ain't worth it, Billy. Well, he said it ain't worth it. He ended up moving back to Florida and invested in real estate and a boat building business with his brother Ben.
All right, Brother Ben, you
He's
want
like,
to build some boats?
Brother Ben, he's like, you want to build some more boats for millionaires? He's like,
Right.
Well, obviously.
Of course, I thought you'd never ask.
Duh.
30th of December, 1948. While aboard his private yacht, the Blue Lagoon, Bill died of a heart attack at the age of 78. Since Bill never cut the alcohol he sold and had a good reputation as being honest, he and his product became known as, you guessed it, The Real McCoy.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the term came from. This is the term Real McCoy.
It's the Real McCoy right here,
It's
buddy.
the Real McCoy.
Author Frederick F. Vandewater would write a book called The Real McCoy, which was about, you guessed it, Al Capone.
Like, what?
It was about Bill. In 1931, he wrote this book. In the HBO series Boardwalk Empire, Bill McCoy is played by Pierce Bunning. When asked how Bill would be remembered, his brother Ben simply replied, "When the country went dry, he irrigated it." Quote, end quote.
Quote, end quote. That's a pretty great way to end this episode on Bill McCoy, which, pretty short one, to be honest. It's probably going to be about 25 minutes. And, I mean,
what are you going to do?
His story's short, but he was only in the game for like 4 years.
Yeah,
but in that 4 years, he inspired a character to be on Boardwalk Empire, which was a pretty popular show, and clearly inspired a whole saying, the Real McCoy, that lived on for decades and decades after his death. And at one time, we already established that he was one of the most wanted man in Prohibition at that point in time that he was operating. So
and had the best whiskey all around.
And had the best whiskey, yes. Never cut. I mean, what other? I guarantee there wasn't one other rum runner and bootlegger out there that never cut their alcohol, never fucked with it, never did anything, never hiked the prices, never screwed over somebody, never partnered with the mob or the corrupt police or anything like that. This guy was legit could get in the rum running business, and he earned the reputation for it. So I didn't know about this guy before we started this episode, and I was like, "Who the hell is Bill McCoy?" There's no way this guy's story can be interesting. And then I read about it, and I was like, "This isn't actually interesting." Where you always hear about the Prohibition stuff, outrunning cars and
right.
started NASCAR and all that stuff on the ground. You never hear about the water side of it. People transporting it on ships and shit,
that was
which was a big fucking part of it, where they got all of it. Obviously, you can't. You had stills and stuff, but a lot of imports. This dude was hauling 1,500 cases of whiskey.
Crazy stuff.
How many did a case have in it? At least 12. 12 in a case. That's 1,500 times 12. What's that?
What?
1,500 times 12?
1,500 times 12.
What, 16,000? 16,000 bottles of whiskey? 15 times 10 would be... 1,500 times 10 would be 15,000, right? Then you can do another fucking... about 16,500, 17,000 bottles of whiskey he was hauling every time.
Whiskey on a wall.
So there you go. Whiskey. Bill McCoy. The Real McCoy. The most honest and had the best stuff out there. Took over a fishing village. Isn't that crazy? You can go to a small town, and then because he was doing so good, everybody else went there. It was like, yeah, we just transformed this town to a fishing town to a bootlegging town. Not even, I guess it wouldn't be bootlegging because it wasn't legal in France. And it was a French colony, so.
It was fine.
Right.
It was fine.
It was fine.
Good stuff.
This is going to do it for our 5th episode of Prohibition. We'll be back next week for...
Mickey and Mallory.
The,
Mickey and Mallory.
What is that movie called?
Natural Born Killers.
Natural Born Killers. There we go.
Nice. We actually...
Mickey and Mallory.
We actually might be doing Bonnie and Clyde.
No, not next week.
Not next week?
No. We got, literally only, 3 more people of the Prohibition. Because the Prohibition that was actual big rum runners and this stuff like that, there's only 7 stories that are worth even telling. Because all of them, there's countless people that you can look up that were rum runners, but number one, they don't have a backstory. Nobody knows the story. So we'd literally come on here and be like, well, this story is about John Smith.
Oh, you can do it.
He ran rum from 1918 to 1931, and then he got incarcerated. And then, all right, guys, it's going to end the episode.
We can do
literally all we would do.
We can do a show that names at least 10 people.
I don't know about that.
But Bonnie and Clyde is definitely Prohibition.
Well, they didn't run. They didn't run.
So?
They didn't run. They didn't run. So? They are in the era of Prohibition, right. So they couldn't be considered Prohibition era.
Of course they are. 1931.
I mean, we gotta. If we're gonna go, well, obviously, we already know we. Yeah, but they're more late.
No.
Middle 30s.
No, 31 to 33, 34. I think they died in 34. And that's when fucking... They were Public Enemy number 1.
We're getting there. We have Bonnie and Clyde. Babyface Nelson,
Prohibition.
all those guys. They're
That's
not Prohibition.
Prohibition.
None of them were involved in those are bank robbers.
It don't matter. Still
all that
Prohibition
stuff.
era.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Bonnie and Clyde were
late
30s.
Public Enemy number 1.
Late 30s.
Public Enemy number 1.
Died in 1934, so
that's
they
it.
were during the Prohibition, huh?
1931, 1934, man. Prohibition, motherfuckers.
Yeah, but they didn't have no part in Prohibition. That's my point.
Right,
We'll
during the Great Depression, actually.
Well, more of a Great Depression, but they did operate. Prohibition ended in 33, so.
You're operating in Prohibition, so.
What I'm saying, we're obviously gonna get the actual bootleggers.
You got Warren Beatty.
We're obviously gonna get the actual bootleggers and people that were selling liquor and doing all that shit during Prohibition out of the way, and then we'll move to Bonnie and Clyde, John Derringer, Babyface Nelson, Machine Gun Kelly, all those guys that are at the same time frame as this. They just took a little other way of making money by robbing banks and killing cops.
And murdering people.
So, as stated already, we got a lot to get to. We got a couple more strictly Prohibition, focused on alcohol transport and illegal alcohol stuff. And then we'll move right on to Bonnie and Clyde and the likes of those guys. So, yeah, Outlaws and Gunslingers. The only place you're going to find the history. Pretty much the timeline history of
everything.
Not only the most famous, but also little known people. That's what we do. We're learning, like we said all the time, we're learning with you guys. I don't care. A lot of these people we're learning with you guys. So don't take us as experts. We're not experts. We're just here putting together the information that we think anybody would like to hear about these guys. So, yeah, we'll be back next week, though, with the ultra famous Elliot Ness.
Uh-oh.
You guys might know Elliot Ness from our Al Capone episode where he was the leader of the Untouchables, quote, unquote, the most uncorruptible force in police history up at that point, who had the task of taking down Al Capone, which they did, if you heard our Al Capone episode. But people only know about Elliot Ness of that little sliver of his life in Chicago. This guy actually ended up having a pretty messed up last few years of his life, as most of these guys that we cover do. So you already know probably what's going to happen there. But Elliot Ness is next week, and I think we got a couple more lawmen that I think we're going to fit into one episode because, like I said, there's not a lot of information on the rest of these figures in Prohibition. So maybe we'll do 2 lawmen.
Once we start getting to like the 50s, 60s, 70s, we're gonna get some stories.
Yeah, we'll get some stories, but that even applies to the mob, though.
Right.
A lot of these guys with the mob, we're not gonna know.
Right. It's true.
So we're only gonna know like the big figures of the mob. So, well, we'll get there when we get there. You can go check us out on our other podcast, The Mouthy Michiganders, everywhere you get your podcasts. Right now, we're in the middle of nothing. We're literally in the middle of nothing. But we're
in the middle of something.
We got like 280 episodes backlog, so you guys can go check us out over there. And if you're into what could we categorize Lee and Corey as? If you're into
skit,
improv, comedy type, like it's a private investigator cases, crazy private investigator cases, like
anything,
like knocked over trash cans. This gay guy tries to lure Lee and Corey over there because his trash cans supposedly are getting knocked over, but he just wants to see him. Like crazy stuff like that happens. A barking dog.
Yeah, there's a couple that wakes up every morning and their furniture's moved around.
Right.
We don't know why, but we find out. Well, we don't. Lee and Corey find out.
Another one, and neighbors complain about a barking dog. They go over there. They figure out that the barking dog is actually a mentally ill wife of the next door neighbor. There's all kinds of crazy shit like that.
Oh, the pig
comedy.
farmer. The pig farmer.
Pig farmer.
You guys like that.
Guys, go check that out. Lee and Corey on the case, wherever you get your podcast again. And we'll be back next week for Elliot Ness.
He is inspiration for the Loch Ness Monster.
And nobody's ever seen him.
Nope.
Except for in one foggy picture, one foggy day in Ireland, right? Is it
Ireland?
Scottish?
I think it's Ireland.
Scottish.
Is it
Scotland.
Scottish?
I think it's Scotland. Yeah, Loch Ness is Scotland.
Yeah, the
yeah.
monster.
We'll be back next week for Elliot Ness. We're the Mountain Michiganders with
Bang dang.